The morning had started like any other on the Andron colony. The sun rose slowly over the small settlements, casting golden light over the farmland and the glass domes of the city. People moved about their daily routines, children played in the open fields, and scientists checked on their experiments in quiet labs. It was a place built from hope, a place where humanity had tried to start fresh, far from Earth, far from conflict. Life was simple, calm, and peaceful. Nobody could have imagined what was about to happen. Without warning, the sky darkened. The first warning came as a strange shadow moving across the horizon. People stopped what they were doing, squinting upwards. A low hum grew louder, a sound that did not belong to the wind or machines. And then they saw them, huge warships, sleek and black, descending from orbit like predators. The ships moved silently at first, almost gracefully, before their engines roared, filling the sky with thunder. Panic spread immediately. Families ran from their homes, clutching each other, unsure where to hide. People who had never faced danger before now realized that they were completely unprepared. The colony tried to send distress signals, but the alien ships seemed to anticipate every move. Communication towers were struck before messages could leave, and the few drones that attempted to rise in defense were destroyed instantly. The colonists watched in horror as the first blasts fell upon the city. Buildings crumbled, fires erupted, and the air filled with smoke and ash. People screamed, calling for loved ones, but the attackers did not pause. They moved systematically, targeting homes, farms, and the small factories that kept the colony alive. In the chaos, the courage of ordinary people shone through. Farmers grabbed tools to protect their families. Teachers led children to safe underground shelters, and scientists tried to save critical research. Every effort seemed small against the overwhelming firepower of the attackers, yet every act mattered. Despite fear gripping their hearts, the colonists refused to give up. They ran through smoke-filled streets, shielding the injured, carrying children, and warning neighbors. Even as explosions rocked the ground beneath them, the people did not falter. Amid the destruction, small acts of humanity stood out. One elderly woman helped a young boy trapped under debris, lifting a broken beam despite her frail strength. Two friends pulled an injured man from a burning building, ignoring the flames that licked their own clothes. Each act of bravery was a tiny spark of hope in a world being swallowed by terror. The attackers showed no mercy. Their ships unleashed beams of energy that cut through everything in their path. Entire neighborhoods were wiped out in minutes. The colonists had no weapons capable of defending themselves, no military support nearby, only their courage and will to survive. They ran through streets lined with rubble, their faces streaked with soot and tears. Mothers held children close as buildings collapsed around them. Fathers tried to block paths with anything they could find, but every attempt was met with overwhelming force. And then came the silence, a brief pause in the chaos that was almost more terrifying than the attacks themselves. People peeked from behind destroyed walls, gasping for breath, trying to understand what had just happened. The ships hovered, almost as if assessing the colony. It was in that moment that everyone realized the attackers were not here by accident. They had come with a plan, and it was meant to destroy. The colonists were defenseless, ordinary humans, and that made them targets. Even as despair threatened to take hold, a few voices rose above the fear. Citizens shouted instructions, guiding people to hidden tunnels and underground shelters. Families formed small groups, sticking together, finding safety wherever they could. The colony, though battered and broken, refused to completely surrender. They may not have had weapons, but they had each other, and that for a moment felt like the only thing keeping them alive. By the end of the first wave of attacks, much of the city lay in ruins. Smoke covered the sky, fires raged across the farmlands, and the air was thick with ash. The survivors gathered in whatever safe spaces remained, counting each other, checking for injuries and mourning the first losses. The sound of the ship's engines faded into the distance, leaving a silence that felt heavy and unnatural. No one knew if the attackers would return or if help would ever come. In the quiet that followed, the colony's people looked at each other with a mix of fear, grief, and determination. They had been attacked without warning, targeted while defenseless, yet they were still alive. That survival, fragile as it was, carried a spark of hope. Somewhere far away on Earth, someone would hear their call, and when that help came, the attackers would learn that humanity did not give up easily. Even in the midst of devastation, life clung stubbornly to existence. Families huddled together, sharing water and food, Strangers helped one another, and the wounded were tended with whatever medical supplies remained. Every heartbeat, every breath was a quiet act of resistance. The colony had been attacked, yes, but it had not been destroyed. Humanity's resilience had not yet been broken, and that truth would echo far beyond the ruined streets of Andron. 3 days had passed since the attack on Andron Colony. On Earth, life continued in its usual rhythm, unaware of the horrors unfolding in the distant colony, until the first distress signal arrived. It was a broken, garbled transmission, filled with static, but the desperation in the voices came through clearly. People were screaming, buildings were burning, and the faces of the colonists flashed across the screens. The message was short, chaotic, and terrifying, but it left no doubt the colony had been attacked, and they had no way to defend themselves. The moment the signal reached the United Earth Command, panic and outrage spread through every level of government. Citizens crowded news channels demanding answers. Military leaders called emergency meetings that lasted late into the night. Scientists and engineers analyzed the fragments of the transmission, trying to determine the attacker's technology, origin, and strength. But no one had ever seen ships like these. Sleek, black, and far larger than any warship Earth had built in decades. They moved with precision that suggested intelligence, not chaos. For many, disbelief came first. How could anyone attack a defenseless human settlement without warning? The Andron colony had not engaged in any conflict. They were farmers, scientists, families, ordinary people, building a life far from Earth's crowded cities. And yet here they were, victims of a calculated strike. Questions flew through the minds of everyone watching the transmission. Why target the helpless? What had the colony done to deserve this? And most importantly, what could Earth do in time to stop further destruction? In response, the Global Defense Council convened immediately. Representatives from every major nation and space program gathered in a large orbital station hovering above Earth. Screens displayed images from the distress signal, burning fields, crumbling homes, terrified citizens. The council debated for hours, weighing diplomacy against military action. Some argued caution, warning that rushing into retaliation could start a wider conflict. Others, particularly those with military experience, insisted that hesitation would be deadly. The message was clear. There could be no mercy for those who attacked the defenseless. Meanwhile, ordinary people on Earth were not willing to wait. Communities rallied together, volunteering to support any rescue or defense mission. Scientists worked around the clock, designing emergency evacuation plans and rapid response drones. Engineers repaired and upgraded old warships, equipping them with the most advanced weapons available. Families of military personnel prayed for their loved ones while quietly sending messages of encouragement. Across the globe, people were united by anger, fear, and determination. For the first time in decades, humanity felt a shared purpose so strong that it surpassed borders and politics. As the council continued its deliberations, the full scale of the tragedy became clear. Surveillance satellites captured images of the colony from orbit. Entire districts flattened, agricultural zones turned to ash, and survivors huddled in small pockets of safety. The colonists were alive, but badly injured, traumatized, and terrified. It was a sobering reminder that inaction could not be an option. Those who had attacked the helpless had underestimated humanity's will to fight back, and the council realized that Earth had to act, not just to save Andron, but to prevent similar attacks on other colonies. Orders were finally given to mobilize the Iron Halo fleet, Earth's dormant warships that had been mothballed after decades of peace. Massive carriers, armed with railguns and plasma cannons, left their hangars and rose into the upper atmosphere. Battleships equipped with the latest defense systems prepared to follow, joined by smaller, agile ships capable of rapid strikes. Every crew member, veteran, or new recruit knew the stakes. They were not just defending Earth. They were defending the principle that humanity would not tolerate attacks on the innocent. While the fleet prepared, intelligence teams worked tirelessly to study the attackers' movements. They analyzed the data from the transmission, trying to identify weaknesses, predict strategies, and understand the enemy's technology. Even with limited information, patterns emerged. The attackers moved in coordinated formations, striking without warning, and targeting infrastructure rather than individual combatants. Earth strategists realized they needed to be faster, smarter, and more precise than ever before. Every mistake could cost countless lives. both on Andron and in future colonies. Across the planet, civilians watched the preparations with a mix of hope and fear. News channels broadcasted the assembly of the fleet, showing the massive ships rising into orbit, their steel hulls reflecting the sun like giant guardians. Children asked questions their parents struggled to answer. Families held hands, silently praying that the fleet would arrive in time. Ordinary people, though far from the battlefield, felt a personal connection to the colony thousands of light years away. They understood in the deepest sense that this was humanity defending itself, not for glory or conquest, but for survival and justice. Even as the fleet readied to depart, Earth faced a sobering reality. There was no guarantee the colony could be saved in time. Communications remained intermittent and every hour mattered. Scientists worked feverishly to repair broken transmitters, while commanders plotted the fleet's course through dangerous space, where debris fields and unknown hazards could delay their progress. The tension was palpable. For many, the waiting felt unbearable. Every citizen, soldier, and leader shared the same thought. Humanity could not fail the defenseless. Finally, after days of preparation, the first ships of the Iron Halo fleet left orbit. They moved silently, a vast formation of power and precision, reflecting the determination of every person back on Earth. Pilots and crew members carried the weight of their fellow humans' hopes on their shoulders. They had trained for battle, studied tactics, and prepared for the worst, but this was different. They were not fighting an enemy that had provoked them in war. They were fighting for people who could not fight back, for families who had only lived in peace. As the fleet disappeared into the void, a quiet resolve spread across Earth. People watched the skies, knowing that the same fleet might never return unchanged. They feared loss, yet their fear was tempered by hope. Humanity had finally shown that it would not stand idle in the face of cruelty. The distress signal from Andron had not only called for help, it had awakened Earth's fighting spirit. And somewhere in the darkness of space, the defenders were already preparing for the reckoning that awaited the attackers. The Iron Halo fleet had left Earth's orbit, but the work was far from over. Every ship was alive with activity, every crew member moving with purpose, aware that they were carrying the weight of countless lives. The fleet wasn't just a collection of warships. It was humanity's message to the universe. We will protect the helpless no matter the cost. Inside the largest carrier, thousands of crew members prepared for the journey ahead. Engineers checked engines, recalibrated weapons, and reinforced shields. Pilots ran simulations, reviewing attack strategies, practicing maneuvers, and learning to anticipate enemy tactics. Even those who had never faced real battle before were determined to rise to the challenge. Fear existed, yes, but it was controlled, turned into focus and determination. Every human on that ship knew they were the thin line between survival and annihilation for the colony. The fleet moved in perfect formation. From space, it looked like a silver arrow, cutting through the darkness with a grace that hid its deadly purpose. Observers back on Earth watched as the ship slipped silently into the void. For many, it was a moment of pride, but also of anxiety. People had trained for war in simulations, but no training could truly prepare them for the reality of defending humans who could not defend themselves. Commanders held meetings in dimly lit rooms aboard the carriers, discussing tactics and analyzing enemy patterns. The information from Andron Colony had been incomplete, but it revealed enough to form a plan. The attackers were fast, highly organized, and ruthless, but they were also predictable in their patterns. Every strike they made on the defenseless colony had been precise, and that precision offered insight. Humanity could use it against them. At the same time, the fleet's medical teams prepared for the worst. Even though the mission was primarily offensive, the survival of the colonists remained a priority. Hospitals were set up in secure sections of the carriers, stocked with supplies and staffed by doctors and nurses who had trained for every imaginable emergency. They had spent years treating injuries and illness on Earth, but nothing compared to the scale of trauma they might face after an attack of this magnitude. Each doctor understood that their work would not just save lives, it would preserve hope. For the pilots, the journey was both terrifying and exhilarating. Young recruits had never seen the galaxy beyond Earth, and now they were flying alongside veterans in the vast, empty stretches of space. Every navigation system, every radar blip demanded attention. They knew the enemy could appear without warning, and they were ready for that moment. The pilots shared stories of home and childhood memories, holding on to the familiar to keep fear at bay. Even in a warship, laughter found a place. It reminded them of what they were fighting for. As the fleet traveled deeper into space, the enormity of the mission became clear. They were leaving behind the safety of Earth, entering unknown regions where no human had set foot in decades. Stars stretched infinitely in every direction, beautiful and indifferent. Crew members often paused at observation decks, staring into the cosmos, thinking about the lives waiting for them on Andron Colony. Each light in the distance reminded them of a story, a family, a person who deserved to live. The beauty of space could not erase the threat ahead, but it gave the crew a quiet courage that no simulation could teach. The fleet's communication officers worked constantly, scanning for any sign of the enemy. Static-filled transmissions from Andron had provided some clues, but the attackers were intelligent and cautious. They avoided detection whenever possible. That only made the fleet's mission more urgent. Every delay could cost lives. Every wrong move could allow the enemy to strike another defenseless colony. Operators stayed alert, eyes glued to screens, fingers ready to transmit orders at a moment's notice. Despite the tension, humanity's resilience shone through in unexpected ways. Chefs prepared meals for hundreds of people in cramped kitchens, sharing food and conversation to ease the stress of the long journey. Mechanics joked while repairing engines, finding humor even as they worked with sweat and oil covering their faces. Teachers and counselors aboard the ships helped the younger recruits deal with fear and anxiety, reminding them why they had joined this mission. The fleet was not just a war machine, it was a community, united by purpose and compassion. Days passed, and the fleet neared the outer edge of the Andron system. Reports indicated that the attackers had regrouped, moving quickly between colonies to find new targets. The fleet increased its pace, every ship straining toward maximum speed. Pilots ran final simulations, engineers checked weapon systems repeatedly, and command staff reviewed every possible scenario. Earth had given them everything it could: technology, training, and strategy. Now it was up to the humans aboard the fleet to act. In the quiet moments between activity, crew members reflected on why they had volunteered. Some had friends or family on distant colonies. Some felt the need to protect all humans, and others simply could not stand by while the defenseless suffered. Each person carried their own motivations, yet all shared a common bond. They were human, and they would not abandon those who could not defend themselves. That bond was stronger than any fear, stronger than any enemy weapon. When the fleet finally arrived at the outskirts of the Andron system, the scale of destruction became visible. Smoke and fire from the initial attack still lingered on the surface, even from orbit. Tiny pockets of survivors moved among ruins, signaling for help. The fleet's command center relayed the images to Earth, and the message was clear: time was critical. Every second counted, and humanity's next moves would decide whether the defenseless would survive or perish. The commanders gathered the fleet for one final briefing before engaging the enemy. Maps of the colony and surrounding areas were displayed, showing likely positions of the attackers. Pilots were assigned to strike teams, engineers to defensive units, and medical teams to recovery zones. Orders were precise, leaving no room for confusion. Every person understood their role, every ship its mission. The moment of confrontation was near, and there was no turning back. And yet, even in the tension, humanity's spirit remained unbroken. The fleet moved as one, a testament to discipline, courage, and unity. Crew members exchanged encouraging words. Children of the crew who had been brought along for observation drew pictures to remind adults what they were protecting. And even the quietest corners of the ships were alive with hope. Humanity was facing a threat unlike any it had known, but it faced it together. As the first contact with the attackers drew near, the fleet slowed, entering the zones where the enemy was expected. Every eye scanned the stars for movement, every sensor active, every weapon ready. Silence fell across the ships, not a silence of fear, but a silence of focus. The Iron Halo fleet had been prepared for this moment for decades, and now it had arrived. Every human aboard knew that they were carrying more than weapons. They were carrying justice, courage, and the promise that the defenseless would not be abandoned. The first signs of the enemy appeared as faint shadows in the distance. Sleek, black, and ominous, the attackers had not expected the humans to arrive so quickly, or in such force. Yet here they were, an unstoppable wave of ships carrying the fury of a species unwilling to let the innocent suffer. Pilots gripped controls, engineers monitored systems, and commanders gave the final orders. It was a moment of truth where training met courage and where humanity would show that it could not be underestimated. The fleet's weapons hummed to life. Every system was online, every crew member alert. The time for preparation had ended. The time for action had arrived. Humanity was ready not just to fight but to protect, to defend, and to ensure that the defenseless would survive. In the darkness of space, the Iron Halo fleet shone like a beacon, a warning to the attackers and a promise to the innocent. Earth would not fail them. The Iron Halo fleet moved steadily through the outer reaches of the Andron system, each ship alert and ready. Every crew member knew the first strike was coming. The enemy had already shown its ruthlessness, targeting the defenseless colony, and now humanity was about to respond. The silence across the fleet was heavy, but it was not the silence of fear. It was the silence of focus, of preparation, of understanding the weight of what they were about to do. Commanders gathered in the central control room of the largest carrier, reviewing satellite images, sensor readings, and attack simulations one last time. The enemy's positions were faint but visible. They had regrouped after the initial assault, forming formations to strike again at Andron or move to other colonies. The humans could not allow this. Every decision made in this room could mean life or death for thousands of people. Every movement had to be precise, every strike deliberate. Outside the control room, crew members performed final checks. Pilots secured their harnesses, testing their thrusters and navigation systems. Engineers ran diagnostics on railguns, plasma cannons, and energy shields. Medical teams readied field units for rapid deployment, preparing to receive survivors as soon as they could land. Even the youngest recruits, who had never faced real combat, were taught one simple truth: protect the innocent at all costs, and never let fear control you. The first sign of the enemy came as a flicker on the radar, a shadow moving quickly across the dark expanse of space. The attackers were faster than expected, but the fleet had anticipated them. Orders were given with calm precision. Strike teams moved into formation, surrounding the enemy ships and cutting off escape routes. Pilots tightened their grips on the controls, hearts racing, yet minds focused entirely on the mission. The training, the drills, the simulations, it all mattered now. When the first shots were fired, the effect was immediate. The enemy had underestimated humanity's speed and coordination. Energy beams cut through the void, striking the attackers' ships with precision, disabling engines and weapon systems without destroying them entirely. The humans wanted the enemy to understand the cost of their cruelty, not merely to fight for destruction. Yet even as the battle unfolded, the fleet maintained discipline, avoiding areas where survivors might still be trapped on Andron. Every strike was calculated, every move measured. From orbit, the crew could see the devastation the attackers had caused on the colony. Fires still burned, and clouds of smoke rose from flattened structures. Yet in those ruins, survivors moved, signaling for help. The fleet's medical teams and rescue units prepared to deploy immediately. Even in the chaos of battle, humanity remembered its mission: to protect those who could not defend themselves. Soldiers and pilots alike carried that responsibility with a solemn understanding. Inside the Battle Command Center, officers coordinated every movement. Sensors tracked enemy ships as they attempted evasive maneuvers. Pilots adjusted in real time, anticipating trajectories, blocking escape routes, and coordinating attacks to minimize collateral damage. Every human in the fleet was aware of what was at stake. This was not just a battle for victory, it was a battle for justice, for the innocent who had no chance to defend themselves. On the surface of Andron, survivors looked up at the fleet with a mix of hope and fear. They had seen the attackers before, destroying everything they had built, and now, for the first time, they saw the humans who had come to fight for them. Signals from the fleet guided rescue units to pockets of survivors. Pilots and drones moved in coordination, dropping supplies, clearing debris, and leading people to safety. Each person rescued became a testament to humanity's resolve, proof that even in the darkest hour, hope could survive. As the battle continued, the fleet demonstrated an impressive combination of strategy, speed, and compassion. Energy blasts disabled enemy ships without unnecessary destruction, while interceptors flanked opponents attempting to flee. Engineers aboard the carriers monitored every system, repairing shields and rerouting power as needed. Pilots communicated constantly, adjusting positions and timing to ensure the safety of both crew and survivors. The fleet acted like a single organism, each part functioning in perfect harmony to protect and strike. Even in the heat of battle, moments of humanity appeared. A pilot paused mid-flight to guide a small group of survivors to safety, despite the proximity of enemy fire. Engineers worked tirelessly to repair a disabled rescue drone, knowing it could be the difference between life and death. Doctors prepared triage units in orbit, anticipating injuries and trauma before they arrived. Every human involved understood that their actions carried meaning far beyond themselves. The enemy, though strong and intelligent, was unprepared for such coordinated resistance. They had expected hesitation, fear, and disorganization. Instead, they faced precision, speed, and an unwavering will to protect the innocent. One by one, their ships were disabled or forced to retreat. The attackers realized that humanity was not the same species they had encountered decades ago. These humans fought not for conquest but for justice, and their determination was unstoppable. Hours passed, and the first wave of the enemy was neutralized. The fleet moved to secure the area, scanning for any remaining threats and coordinating rescue efforts. Survivors on the ground were guided to safe zones where medical teams provided immediate care. Families reunited, children were comforted, and the destruction of the colony slowly began to seem less permanent. Humanity's presence had turned fear into hope, despair into survival. Even as the battle wound down, the fleet remained vigilant. Commanders knew that this was only the beginning. The attackers had forces elsewhere, and other colonies might still be at risk. But in this moment, humanity had proven something important. No one who could not defend themselves would be abandoned. That principle, more than weapons or technology, defined the strength of the fleet. For the crew, the mission was exhausting but fulfilling. Pilots who had never seen combat before now understood the true meaning of bravery. Engineers who had spent months preparing ships and weapons witnessed the results of their work saving lives. Medical teams saw the immediate impact of their readiness, turning despair into recovery. Every human involved experienced a sense of purpose that few could imagine until they lived it themselves. In the aftermath, Earth received the first detailed reports. Video transmissions showed the disabled enemy ships, the coordinated strikes, and the rescue of survivors. The images spread across the planet, bringing relief, pride, and renewed determination. Humanity had not only defended the defenseless but had sent a message to any who might consider attacking again. Earth would fight, and it would fight with precision, courage, and heart. Yet even in victory, there was reflection. Crew members thought of those who had been lost in the initial attacks, of the homes and farms destroyed, and of the trauma etched into the survivors' memories. The fleet celebrated cautiously, knowing that while this battle was won, the war might not be over. The responsibility of protecting the innocent carried on, guiding every action and every decision. As the fleet regrouped in orbit, survivors from Andron Colony were given supplies, medical care, and comfort. They had witnessed destruction but also resilience. The fleet had come without mercy for the attackers but with care for the defenseless. In that contrast, hope was restored. Humanity's determination had been made clear. The weak would be defended, the innocent protected, and no attack on them would go unanswered. The first battle had ended, but the lessons were profound. Humanity had learned that coordination, courage, and compassion could overcome even the most ruthless attackers. The Iron Halo fleet had shown that true strength lay not in firepower alone, but in the willingness to protect those who could not protect themselves. The survivors of Andron Colony would carry this memory forward, and the attackers would understand that humanity could not be intimidated or broken. And so, as the fleet prepared for the next steps, every human aboard understood the truth. The fight had begun, and humanity would continue to fight not for conquest, but for justice, for life, and for the defenseless. The stars themselves seemed to watch, silent witnesses to the courage of a species unwilling to stand by when the innocent were threatened. After the first strike, the Iron Halo fleet did not pause. The initial battle had shown humanity's strength and precision, but the enemy was still out there. High Command had identified the location of the attackers' High Command fleet, a concentrated force near the Orion Gate. a massive energy corridor used for deep space travel. This was where the final confrontation would take place, and everyone aboard the fleet knew it. The stakes could not have been higher. On the carriers, the crew prepared for the approaching battle. Engineers ran final diagnostics on every ship, ensuring shields were fully operational, weapons calibrated, and engines ready for maximum acceleration. Pilots checked their flight systems repeatedly, reviewing maps and coordinates and memorizing every maneuver that might be needed. Even the medical teams worked tirelessly, ensuring triage units and field hospitals were ready to receive the injured immediately. No detail was too small, no precaution unnecessary. Everyone knew that in the coming battle, lives would hang on their readiness and skill. The fleet moved like a living organism, silent and disciplined. Every ship had a role. Some would engage the enemy directly, while others provided cover for rescue operations or served as mobile command centers. Communication channels buzzed constantly, orders given, confirmations received, and adjustments made in real time. The fleet's coordination was flawless, a testament to years of planning, training, and preparation. Every crew member understood that this was not just a fight. It was a demonstration of humanity's resolve. As they approached the Orion Gate, the enemy fleet became visible. Sleek black warships appeared on the sensors, moving with deliberate speed and formation. They had learned from their previous mistakes and were ready to counter the humans' approach. But the Iron Halo fleet had an advantage: experience, precision, and a clear purpose. Humanity was not fighting for conquest or glory. They were fighting to protect the innocent, and that gave them a determination no weapon could match. The first engagement was sudden. The enemy opened fire with energy beams that streaked across the void. Pilots weaved through the attack patterns, using evasive maneuvers and flanking tactics learned from countless simulations. Railguns and plasma cannons fired in return, striking enemy ships with calculated precision. The battle was intense yet methodical. Every strike, every movement was designed not just to defeat the enemy, but to minimize unnecessary destruction. Humanity's goal was clear: disable the attackers and end the threat without harming more than necessary. In the command centers, officers coordinated attacks and defenses with remarkable efficiency. Sensors tracked every enemy movement, predicting their next action and relaying information to pilots and ship crews. Engineers rerouted power to shields and weapons as needed, ensuring that no ship was left vulnerable. Medical teams prepared for the wounded, ready to deploy rescue pods and field units at a moment's notice. Every part of the fleet worked in harmony, each person understanding the weight of responsibility they carried. Amid the chaos of battle, human courage shone through in small but meaningful ways. Pilots risked their lives to guide damaged rescue drones through enemy fire. Engineers stayed behind to repair systems under threat, and medics reached survivors even as explosions rocked nearby ships. The bravery of ordinary people, engineers, cooks, medical staff, and pilots, was as crucial as the firepower of the fleet. Each act of courage contributed to the success of the mission and the survival of those who could not defend themselves. As the hours of battle stretched on, the enemy fleet began to falter. Their formations, once precise and intimidating, showed cracks. Human strategy and coordination proved superior. Strike teams disabled key ships, cutting communication lines and forcing opponents into disarray. Pilots executed daring maneuvers, cutting off escape routes and isolating the enemy's strongest ships. Engineers and officers monitored the results, adjusting plans in real time to maintain the advantage. Humanity's determination and unity were proving unstoppable. On the surface of nearby colonies, those who had witnessed previous attacks watched from orbiting satellites or observation posts. They saw the Iron Halo fleet in action, precise and relentless. For many, it was a reassurance that humanity would not abandon the defenseless. The fleet's actions were not just about winning a battle. They were about sending a message. Anyone who attacked innocent humans would face the full force of Earth's protection. The image of the fleet moving with purpose and precision became a symbol of hope and justice. Despite the progress, the battle was far from easy. The enemy adapted quickly, attempting to regroup and strike back. Beams of energy streaked across space, explosions lit the darkness, and debris floated through the void. Pilots dodged and counterattacked, while engineers rerouted power to shields and weapons to maintain defense. Medics prepared for the injured as small rescue teams moved through the debris fields, retrieving survivors and providing immediate care. Every human on the fleet was stretched to their limit, but no one faltered. Finally, after hours of relentless combat, the enemy fleet began to break. Their largest ships were disabled, and the remaining vessels attempted to retreat through the Orion Gate. But the Iron Halo fleet anticipated their movement. Strike teams cut off escape routes, and precision attacks ensured that the enemy could not regroup elsewhere. Pilots executed maneuvers that trapped the remaining ships, forcing them to surrender or be neutralized. The attackers, once confident and ruthless, now faced the full might of humanity united in purpose. In the aftermath, the fleet secured the Orion Gate and ensured the safety of surrounding colonies. Engineers and medics worked to repair damaged ships, while pilots and officers continued to monitor for any remaining threats. Survivors from Andron Colony and nearby systems were rescued, provided with medical care, and brought aboard the fleet or returned to safe settlements. Humanity had not only won the battle but had prevented further attacks on the defenseless. The crew reflected on what had just occurred. The battle had been intense, dangerous, and exhausting, yet the mission was a success. The Iron Halo fleet had demonstrated humanity's strength, unity, and resolve. Every member of the fleet, from pilots to engineers, medics to command officers, had contributed to a victory that would be remembered for generations. They had protected the innocent, punished the attackers, and shown the galaxy that humanity could not be underestimated. Even in victory, there was reflection and sorrow. The losses from the initial attacks could not be ignored. Lives had been lost, homes destroyed, and trauma left behind. Yet the survivors, both human and human spirit, had endured. The fleet's actions had not only saved lives, but had also restored hope. The message was clear: humanity would defend the defenseless, and any who threatened them would face consequences. As the Iron Halo fleet prepared to return to Earth, the crew felt a quiet pride. They had accomplished something extraordinary, yet they also understood that vigilance must continue. The galaxy was vast and threats could emerge anywhere, but humanity had shown that courage, unity, and determination could overcome even the most ruthless adversaries. Every person aboard carried the memory of the battle, the faces of survivors, and the knowledge that they had made a difference. The survivors of Andron Colony were guided safely to new settlements. Medical teams worked tirelessly to treat injuries, while engineers helped rebuild essential infrastructure. Communities began to recover, inspired by the arrival of the fleet and the demonstration of human resilience. The battle had not only defended lives but had rekindled hope, proving that even in the darkest times humanity would not abandon those in need. Earth received detailed reports of the battle. The images and transmissions of the fleet in action spread quickly, inspiring people across the planet. Citizens felt pride and reassurance knowing that humanity had the courage and capability to protect the innocent. Schools, news channels, and families discussed the mission, emphasizing the bravery, unity, and compassion that had driven the victory. The story of the Iron Halo fleet became a testament to what humanity could achieve when united by purpose and guided by a moral imperative. The battle was over, but the lessons endured. Humanity had learned that strength without compassion was empty, that courage was not measured by firepower alone, and that protecting the defenseless was the highest duty of a civilization. The Iron Halo fleet had shown that precision, preparation, and human spirit could overcome even the most formidable adversaries. And so, the fleet set a course back to Earth, carrying with it survivors, stories of courage, and proof that humanity would not tolerate injustice. Every member of the fleet knew that this victory was more than a military success. It was a statement about the values that defined humanity. The stars themselves seemed to bear witness as the fleet moved steadily toward home, carrying hope for the future and a promise that the defenseless would never face harm alone. After the battle near the Orion Gate, the Iron Halo fleet began its journey back to Earth, carrying survivors, memories, and a heavy sense of responsibility. The immediate danger was over, but the aftermath of the attack on Andron Colony lingered in every mind. Crew members walked through the ships checking on the rescued colonists, providing food, water, and medical attention. Even those who had participated in the battle could feel the weight of what had happened, the lives lost, the homes destroyed, and the trauma that would take years to heal. The survivors were quiet at first, many still in shock. They had witnessed destruction the likes of which they had never imagined, and they had feared they would never see Earth again. But the humans aboard the fleet treated them with care and respect. Medics spoke gently, explaining the steps being taken to keep them safe. Engineers helped them find temporary spaces to rest, while crew members offered simple gestures of kindness, warm blankets, fresh water, and soft meals. Even in the midst of recovery, humanity's spirit of compassion shone brightly. As the fleet moved through space, stories began to emerge. Survivors spoke quietly among themselves, sharing memories of loved ones lost and narrow escapes. Children asked questions about the ships, the crew, and what would happen next. Crew members answered patiently, reassuring them that safety and care were priorities. These small conversations reminded everyone aboard the fleet why they had fought so hard. This was more than a mission. It was about preserving life and hope in a galaxy that had shown little mercy. On Earth, news of the fleet's success spread quickly. Citizens watched live transmissions of the rescued colonists being cared for aboard the carriers. The images inspired pride and relief, but also reflection. People realized that humanity's survival depended not just on technology or strategy, but on the willingness to protect those who could not defend themselves. Schools and families discussed the story of the Iron Halo fleet, emphasizing the courage, teamwork, and compassion that had saved countless lives. Back aboard the fleet, commanders coordinated the rebuilding of Andron Colony. Teams of engineers, scientists, and medics planned the reconstruction of essential infrastructure, shelters, farms, water supplies, and communication systems. Volunteers from the fleet helped organize supplies and distribute resources efficiently. Every human involved understood that recovery was just as important as the battle itself. The people of Andron had been given a second chance, and humanity would not let them down. The fleet also worked to document what had happened. Sensors and cameras recorded the battle, the rescues, and the efforts to save survivors. These records would serve multiple purposes, as evidence for Earth's councils, as lessons for future missions, and as a testament to human courage and resilience. Every crew member took this responsibility seriously, knowing that the story of what had happened could inspire generations to come. Despite the successes, the emotional toll was immense. Survivors struggled with the trauma of seeing their homes destroyed and loved ones lost. Crew members comforted them, offering reassurance and presence. Even small gestures, a hand on a shoulder, a calm voice, a shared meal, helped rebuild trust and a sense of security. Humanity's greatest strength was not only in weapons or ships, but in the care and support extended to those who had suffered. As the fleet approached Earth, celebrations were quiet, but meaningful. Pilots who had risked their lives in battle shared stories with engineers and medics. The rescued colonists, though still shaken, began to regain confidence and hope. Families reunited where possible, and children slowly returned to play, reminding everyone that life could endure even after tragedy. For a moment, the galaxy seemed a little less cold and dangerous. The lessons of the conflict spread beyond the fleet and Andron colony. Governments, scientists, and citizens realized the importance of preparedness, coordination, and compassion. Humanity had demonstrated that it could face an overwhelming threat and still act with precision and care. The Iron Halo fleet had not only defended the defenseless, but had set a precedent for how humanity would respond to future threats. Strength, courage, and empathy had proven to be a powerful combination. In the months that followed, Andron Colony began to rebuild. New homes were constructed, fields replanted, and communication systems restored. Survivors slowly returned to their routines, though the memory of the attack would never fully fade. Yet for the first time since the assault, there was hope. The arrival of the fleet had shown that humanity could protect the helpless, and that no one needed to face danger alone. Earth, too, was changed. The story of the Iron Halo fleet and the Yarnir defense of Andron Colony became a symbol of unity and strength. People across the planet reflected on the importance of protecting those who could not defend themselves, understanding that humanity's greatness was measured not only by technology or military power, but by moral courage. Lessons learned from The battle influenced training programs, defense strategies, and even social policies. Humanity would be stronger, wiser, and more prepared for the challenges ahead. Even years later, the survivors of Andron Colony remembered the fleet. Children who had been rescued grew up hearing stories of the brave pilots, engineers, and medics who had risked everything to save them. Communities honored those who had fallen, celebrated those who had helped, and preserved the memory of the battle as a lesson for the future. Humanity's commitment to defending the defenseless became part of its identity, woven into culture, education, and the collective consciousness. On board the fleet, veterans of the mission reflected quietly. They had seen fear, destruction, and loss, but they had also witnessed courage, resilience, and hope. Every decision, every act, had contributed to saving lives. They understood that their success had not been measured solely by the battle won, but by the lives preserved and the hope restored. Humanity's true victory lay in the care extended to the innocent, and in the unwavering promise that they would never be abandoned. In the vastness of space, the stars shone silently, bearing witness to the courage of humans who had faced overwhelming odds. The Iron Halo fleet, now returning to Earth, carried more than survivors and supplies. It carried stories, memories, and the legacy of humanity's moral strength. For those aboard the ships, every mile traveled was a reminder of the responsibility they bore to protect, to defend, and to ensure that no one ever faced cruelty alone. The people of Earth and the colonies understood that the battle had changed them forever. The universe was full of unknown dangers, but humanity had demonstrated its readiness, not just through weapons or technology, but through courage, unity, and compassion. The attack on Andron Colony had been a tragedy, but it had also been a catalyst, revealing the best qualities of humans when faced with injustice. Humanity had fought with skill, precision, and heart. In the end, the story of the Iron Halo fleet became more than a tale of war. It became a story of what it meant to be human. It showed that even in the darkest moments, people could act with courage and compassion. It demonstrated that protecting the defenseless was not only a duty, but a measure of true strength. And it reminded everyone, whether in colonies far from Earth or in the cities on the planet itself, that no one would face danger alone when humanity was united. The survivors returned to Andron Colony, helping rebuild homes and communities. The fleet returned to Earth, welcomed as heroes, but they carried with them the memory of those who could not be saved. Humanity had faced fear, destruction, and cruelty, but it had also demonstrated resilience, bravery, and the power of compassion. Lessons learned from this mission would guide future generations, ensuring that the principles of protection, courage, and unity remained at the heart of humanity. Life on Andron slowly returned to normal. Children laughed again in the fields. Families rebuilt their homes and communities celebrated the return of safety. Yet everyone remembered the past, honoring the courage of the fleet and the lessons learned. Humanity had proven itself, not just as a species capable of defeating an enemy, but as a species capable of empathy, protection, and moral strength. And so, the story ended not with destruction, but with hope. Humanity had defended the defenseless, punished those who threatened them, and learned that true strength was measured by compassion as much as by power. The Iron Halo fleet had completed its mission, leaving behind survivors, restored communities, and a message that would echo through the galaxy. Those who targeted the helpless would face justice, and humanity would always rise to protect those in need. The galaxy, vast and indifferent, now knew one thing for certain. Earth would defend the innocent, and humanity would never abandon those who could not defend themselves. Courage, unity, and compassion had carried the day, and they would carry humanity into the future.